Okay, welcome back to the next part of the Mars to Jupiter and then on to Europa video that I'm doing. This is the second time that I've gone from Mars to Jupiter. Now, before we really get going with this part, the one thing that I want to say is most people may just want to skip to the next video. What I'm going to do in this section, this is going to just be the coasting phase to go from Mars to Jupiter, so it's not going to be really exciting. In the first Mars to Jupiter video that I did, I actually skipped recording the coasting phase just because it's just boring. Basically, there's nothing going on. But I decided, just for the sake of doing things a little bit differently, I'm going to go ahead and record this phase. So there probably won't be much of anything happening here. I may have to do some kind of mid-course correction during this video, but otherwise it's just going to be roughly 10 minutes of time acceleration. So if you don't want to watch that, go ahead and skip to the next video, and rest assured that you're not going to miss anything exciting. Now, for everybody that is staying tuned, let's get going. So here we are at Mars. We just completed the ejection burn in the last video, and we dumped all the extra fuel modules that were spent. So I'm going to go ahead and close up the cargo doors. No point in leaving those open, I don't suppose. And apparently I left the retro doors open. Don't need those open. I think it's better to close that kind of stuff. In the real world, in real space, there could be, micrometeors, dust, things like that. Out in space, it could get in there and cause problems. So it's best to keep everything closed up. Let me bring up an external MFD. We'll keep an eye on a couple of things here as we are accelerating away, but I'm going to accelerate away mainly using the external camera, so it'll be nice to have an MFD or two available to watch so that we can see what's going on. And I think TransX will be best here. Let me see if I can set that down there. Okay, let's begin our long coasting phase. I'm going to start with a little bit of 10x, actually a little bit of 100. And I actually notice a lot of people do this. They'll start with 100x until they're a little bit away from the body, a planet, moon, whatever. And then they'll speed up to 1,000, then they'll speed up to 10,000. And I think there's a couple of reasons to do that. I think one of the reasons is performance. I think some people's computers don't perform well at higher time accelerations when they're closer to the planets because of the texture rendering. That wouldn't be a problem for my computer. It's pretty good. But I think another reason is I'm not sure if I think I read somewhere the orbiter actually has more accurate calculations. I could be wrong, but I think it has more accurate calculations when you're in closer to these bodies, when you're at lower time warps. I seem to remember reading that somewhere, but I could be way off. Let's get our, I think absolute direction so that I don't have to keep rotating the camera.
Rotation.
And make sure I've got rotation on so that if the vessel starts rotating, I can stop it. we're out to 0.8, so let's go to 1,000. And something else we can also do during the coasting phase, if we want, we don't have to, but when we run out of locks in one of the modules, we can go back to real time and toss out the module. Okay, we're pretty far out, so I think we can handle 10,000 now without any problem. And I believe if we didn't already change our escape plan, oh, there it is. That usually happens when you get close to the edge. There at about 0.00. So we probably don't really need this MFD. Let's bring up TransX over here as well. I forgot about that. You can't have TransX in two externals, because any change you make to one updates the other. So we'll just have to stick with this view. And I guess on this side we'll just reference the sun, I guess. Take a quick look here at our encounter, make sure that things aren't getting too out of alignment. We're still good. Inclination at some point along the way will make an adjustment when we're still really far out away from Jupiter to bring our inclination closer to the equatorial plane. If you remember when I referenced Europa, it was off by like 0.43, I believe. So we want to get close to that inclination well before we get to Jupiter, because the farther out you are from Jupiter when you do those types of changes, the more accurate, the less fuel you use to do it. But we're still a really long way, so I don't think it's necessary to do anything like that right now. Okay, let's go to 100,000. And we're now entering the long coasting phase. This will take a while. So this will be the part of the video where I try my best to think of something to fill the time. I'm not quite sure how successful I will be at doing that. But basically, while I'm sitting here going through these types of long journeys, what I typically do is look at the MFD, like this one. I can see that the time to get to, and then when anytime something like that catches my eye, I usually press F9 just to see what it is. It's like, oh, hey, there's Mercury, cool, and there's Saturn. It's just something to fill the time. And there comes, what is that, maybe Earth? Yep, that's the Earth-Moon system. And now maybe back up here, and this is a good visualization for where we're at. Make this a little larger. The green line pointing to where we are right now, and the long blue line pointing to where Jupiter's at. And these two lines converge at that point, but you can tell that's going to take a while because we're at 100,000 and we've only gone that far. And interesting too is we're slowing down. That's something else to keep in mind. Let me see if I can bring up an MFD that will show that. I'm going to have to reference something. I'll reference Mars. Maybe that'll... Now if I bring up surface, I guess it doesn't show it. Yeah, this keeps switching back and forth for some reason. I don't know why. So it's not, you can't really tell from looking at that. But the idea, anyway, that we're, basically as soon as we leave Mars, we're immediately slowing down for a while. So the time that it takes to go from, say, here to here is less than the time that it would take to travel an equal distance from there to, say, there. And then also the sun is pulling you in once you're out beyond the point where Mars is the strongest gravitational influence. So with each passing area, it takes longer and longer and longer to go until you get close enough to the point where the body that you're trying to get to is actually starting to pull you in. I guess something else we can do is look inside. Close that MFD and let me set that one aside for now. So we can just take a look at our resources and maybe our mission elapse timer. That is interesting, although that information is obviously up here as well, but here at least we can see it shown in days. But obviously we're not burning through any fuel, we're not burning through any RCS, the APU's off, but we are using locks, obviously. So the ship is continually getting lighter, less massive. And there we finally burnt through, maybe not burnt, but we finally used a whole tank of locks. So just for something interesting, perhaps, if we come back to real time for a moment, yeah, let me do that. Turn on the APU, and we'll open those doors and go to 10x just to speed that up.
Information. APU fuel 90%.
And I'm turning off the APU just to get rid of the noise. But we can now jettison that locks, which would be, something like up here maybe. Yeah. See, these are, full locks is 13,000 kilograms. This one still has locks in it, and this one's going to be empty, so we'll deploy it.
Payload deployed. Translation.
And we'll just very gently bump the translation. Again, I don't want to do much of that because that'll impact our relative inclination, and we don't want that. So actually even better than bumping translation would just be to do a bit of 10x, because apparently these modules in the payload area are kind of like spring-loaded, and when you deploy one, they do get a little bit of push. So if we just do a bit of 10x, it'll drift away on its own, like that. So now we can close it up. Just a bit of 10x again, just to speed up that animation. And there we have it. Now we've lightened our vessel by another 3,000 kilograms. So when we get to Jupiter and start doing our burns, we'll have a less massive vessel, so we'll burn less fuel. It's just a more efficient way to do things. Okay, let's go ahead and immediately begin warping time ahead again to 100,000, or we'll never get there. So we are, what would you say, about halfway maybe? Well, halfway maybe in terms of distance, but in terms of time, we're not quite halfway because we're slowing down. Let's take a look at the encounter view. You can see we're losing altitude relative to our initial plan. So this may be something to address here in a little while. Maybe keep an eye on it, see if it's just continually going down, or is it going to go up and down. And it would be wonderful if TransX were so reliable that you could dial in a number and have it be exact within a kilometer or two, but clearly that isn't the case. So that means we're going to have to spend a little bit of energy at least on midcourse corrections. And I really do believe that if you really had, I've got to believe that NASA, there's no way they have this much inaccuracy when going out to, when sending the Cassini probe to Saturn or whatever. There's just no way. I mean, they would require so much fuel for midcourse corrections, so they've got to have better math models, better instrumentations, something. I mean, don't get me wrong, this is still amazing with how relatively accurate it is, but when you really get down to it and you really want to start being very precise, especially if you want to use vessels that don't have these, fantastic engines like the XR5 and the XR2 or even the standard Delta glider, if you want to start downloading some of the probes off of Orbit Hangar that have very low impulse, and doing any kind of midcourse correction is something that requires a lot of planning and a lot of thought, because you're not going to have the impulse to do it and you're not going to have the fuel to do it. So when you start getting to that level of accuracy, then this level of being off is pretty absurd. Now, having said all that, let's I think now would be a good time to consider doing a bit of a midcourse. We're not going to do much. It's not going to take much. We're just going to bring our minimum altitude up a bit and work on getting that inclination down closer to what it needs to be. So let's reference Jupiter again. And let's target Europa. And just verify our stuff here. One problem I had in one of my last videos was I had the frame set wrong. If you have the frame set to ecliptic, like here, then this inclination that you see is not right. This is not the correct inclination. What we need is the equatorial frame. So now this is the correct inclination for Europa around Jupiter, whereas this ecliptic, this is the inclination for Europa, I guess it would be around the Sun. And I actually ran into this. I'm usually really good about checking the frame, but in one of my other videos I didn't check the frame and the inclination was wrong. So anyway, just double checking to make sure that this is equatorial. It is. So we want to have a more accurate inclination here. Alright, and I wonder if it's too early to start thinking about the base. Let's go ahead and bring up Map MFD and let's target the base. I downloaded a new base. Oh, please tell me it's in here somewhere. Oh, I see what I did. I have to, on the map, I've got to reference Europa. Now target the base. Yeah, there we go. So once you target the base, actually, it doesn't matter. It's too early to think about base alignment because I've got to get to Jupiter first, so disregard that. Okay, so we'll view the encounter on that side. We'll set the maneuver up on this side. And we'll just go through the variables here and see what does what. So a little bit of negative prograde is helping bring the minimum altitude up. And here I realize that the altitude of Europa is like 600,000 kilometers. So you may be wondering, why would I want the minimum altitude more like a million kilometers? And this may not be a good idea, but my logic is that the farther out you are in orbit around Jupiter, the less fuel you're going to need to insert, to do an orbital insert. So I'm thinking what I'm going to do, instead of trying to go directly to Europa, I'm going to insert into orbit around Jupiter first, and then rendezvous with Europa. I'm gonna do it that way this time. So I want to start with an altitude that's farther out, because I would rather obviously be farther out than closer in, because when I'm farther out it requires less fuel to bring the orbit down than it would to go the other way and bring it up. So hopefully that makes sense. I mean, in fact, I could even be like 2 million kilometers, but I'm actually just going to go for 1 million. And we're saying we're going to need a change of about 29. I really believe that is going to be the better way to go, but just to be double sure, let's go ahead and reset that, and let's check outward. And actually also, before I forget, let's reset the date and let's bump it forward by just a little bit. That'll give me enough time to do all this. So let's check outward. It's going the wrong way. And yeah, that's already more expensive, so I figured that would be the case, but I always like to check. So prograde, and if we needed about negative, about like that. Now let's bump the plane change a little bit. It's going the wrong way. Actually, it just looks like we're not going to be able to get any good plane change adjustment out here. Yeah, it's not really... Alright, let me reset it. So 2.147. We're getting a little bit. I guess we'll take it. That's the lowest point. Let's just go ahead and go with that. I suppose every little bit helps, but we'll get a better adjustment to the inclination when we're closer in. Okay, let's do the maneuver and set that aside for now. We've got view target over here, and we determined that, of course, I need to reference the sun if I'm going to figure it out.
Rotation.
I can already see Jupiter. It's right there. It's going the wrong way. The vessel's still quite heavy. I can feel it in the rotation thrusters. It's requiring quite a bit of input to make the adjustments in the rotation. So I should probably kill rotate now, because it'll take a little while to slow down as well. right there is dead center. Okay. So we're going to do this burn in 110 seconds. Let's speed that up. And a delta V of 28, we're just going to do a couple clicks of main engine. I don't think going full main engine would make much sense. Burning in 2, 1, and burning. Relatively low, relatively small burn, I like that.
Translation.
And we actually stopped the burn on time for a change. Okay, 0.001. I'll take it. Maneuver mode off. And let's look at our encounter. 1,000,000 kilometers. Inclination. Alright, let's go ahead and warp time ahead.
Rotation.
So this is our current location. And we've got to go all the way out here. You can see the gravitational influence of Jupiter. It's already starting to register in orbit MFD. But we've got a ways to go. While I'm warping time ahead, I'm curious if I bring up a line plane MFD and if I reference Jupiter and target Europa. Let me actually back off time acceleration for a moment. Yeah, so it's already able to tell me. Of course, this is relative to the ecliptic, so. Not sure if I want to reference Jupiter or myself. I'm not even sure if you can reference yourself. I'll worry about that part later. I heard another module expire, so let's go ahead and get rid of it. APU. Bay doors. 10x to open them up quicker. And turn the APU off. Get rid of the noise. Come up top. And number 31, deploy.
Payload deployed.
It's gone. It's a bit fanciful. Yeah, I don't like that in terms of realism. I thought the way these were loaded, it would always deploy the ones, it would always make sure they were in proper order for deployment, but apparently it doesn't. So it does let you deploy one that's underneath. That's obviously not very accurate. A little bit of 10x to let that float away for a bit. And that's good enough. APU, close up the doors. 10x. And APU. Okay. And we'll go ahead and go back to time warp, 100,000. And we'll bring orbit MFD back up. $57190. Still got a ways. So 190 days basically. When I'm within roughly 100 days, I'm going to end this section and then pick it back up so that the people that didn't want to watch all this time acceleration can come back and start to see everything. Now normally when I'm doing time acceleration, I don't do all this stuff that I'm doing, by the way. You did not miss out on anything in my previous videos, but I specifically stated this time that since I was going to go ahead and record the time acceleration phase, that I would go ahead and maybe do a mid-course correction or something as part of that step, since I was in fact going to record it, so the people that do want to watch it can, and the people that don't want to watch it can skip it. Yeah, I'll go ahead and end it here in just a couple more minutes. I was wanting to do another mid-course correction, but I'll go ahead and save that for the next video. So now we're 100 days out, and the gravitational influence of Jupiter slowly picking up. We just ended one of our stages, whatever it was, the escape, I guess, eject, I don't know, I wasn't paying attention. And let's go with that. We're less than 70 days away. So, okay, well, if you stayed tuned through the whole time acceleration phase, I hope you enjoyed it at least a little bit. Hopefully I was able to keep you somewhat entertained. If you have any comments, questions, anything like that about the coasting phase, go ahead and leave those questions down below. Comment anything, I'll answer it. I try to answer all the comments. If you like the video, just let me know down below, and we'll see you in the next section.